Welcome, everybody, to another session of the Culinary Institute of Applewood. Today's class is on potatoes, rice, and grains. We're going to talk about a few things today. We're going to look at a history of potatoes and rice. We're going to look at some potatoes and rice facts, as well as nutrition. We'll talk about some varieties of potatoes, as well as some varieties of rice. Also, some methods of cooking potatoes and rice. I'm going to briefly touch on some other grains, and then we have a demonstration by our very own Charles Arola on how to prepare risotto. So let's look at some potato facts and history. All right, potatoes. The perennial plant Solanum tuberosum is the scientific name for potatoes. Potatoes are the fifth largest food crop following rice, wheat, corn, and sugarcane. Now, the Incas in Peru were the first to actually cultivate potatoes right around 8000 BC. In 1536, Spanish conquistadors conquered Peru and brought the potato to Europe, where it flourished. By the end of the 16th century, Basque sailors began to cultivate potatoes along the coast of northern Spain. Sir Walter Raleigh introduced potatoes to Ireland in 1589 on 40,000 acres of land near Cork, Ireland. And it took nearly 4 decades for potatoes to spread to the rest of Europe. Now, Europeans eventually found potatoes easier to grow and cultivate than many other staple crops such as wheat and oats. And potatoes were more productive than grain as they grew underground, and you were able to get more potatoes for every square foot of land that was cultivated. And potatoes also contained most of the nutrients that were required for sustenance. And an acre of potatoes could feed 10 people for a year. You've probably heard of the Irish potato famine. This was a terrible thing. And in the 1840s, a major outbreak of potato blight, which is a type of fungus, swept through Europe that devastated the potato crops. Now, the Irish working class were severely impacted as potatoes were a primary food source for them. At that time, due to this famine, 1 million people emigrated out of Ireland, and another 1 million people died from starvation and related disease due to the potato famine. Let's look at potatoes in the United States. Now, potatoes arrived in the colonies in 1621 when the Bermuda governor sent 2 large cedar chests of them to the governor of Virginia. And the first permanent potato patches were established in 1719 near Derry, New Hampshire, by Scotch-Irish immigrants. Now, Idaho, the present-day largest potato producer, began growing potatoes in 1836. In 1872, when the Russet Burbank variety were introduced, the Idaho potato industry really began to flourish. What about French fries? Well, French fries were introduced in the United States when Thomas Jefferson served them in the White House during his presidency. In 1853, in Saratoga Springs, New York, railroad magnate Cornelius Vanderbilt complained his potatoes were cut too thick and sent them back to the kitchen. In order to spite him, Chef George Crumb sliced some potatoes paper thin. He fried them in hot oil, salted, and then served him. Much to his surprise, Mr. Vanderbilt loved his quote-unquote Saratoga Crunch chips, and the famous potato chip was born. Let's look at a little potato trivia. Now, during the Alaskan Gold Rush, potatoes were practically worth their weight in gold, as they were valued for their vitamin C content And gold at that time was actually more plentiful than nutritious foods. The Incas used potatoes to treat broken bones, rheumatism, frostbite, toothaches, sore throats, and several other ailments. Today, potatoes are grown in all 50 states and in 125 countries around the world. Now, the average American eats about 124 pounds of potatoes each year, while Germans eat about twice that amount. The largest potato ever grown was 25 pounds. It was a pretty big potato. And in 1995, the potato actually became the first vegetable to be grown in space. Let's look at some potato nutrition. As you can see on screen, potatoes contain a number of different vitamins and nutrients. Vitamin C, protein, minimal amount of fat, fiber when you consume it with the skin, fair amount of carbohydrate, potassium, phosphorus, iron, niacin, thiamine, and riboflavin. Now, many people think that sweet potatoes are indeed the quote unquote superfood. Well, sweet potatoes, in fact, do have more vitamin A than regular white potatoes. But both white and sweet potatoes are pretty much nearly identical in nutritional content, except for the vitamin A levels. So they're both nutritious choices. All right, let's look at some rice facts and history. Rice scientifically is known as the grain plant Oryza sativa. Now, rice has fed more people over a longer period of time than any other crop. And as far back as 2500 BC, rice has been used as a food source. Beginning in China, its cultivation spread to Sri Lanka and India. It then passed to Greece and other areas of the Mediterranean, and then finally to southern Europe. Now, Europeans brought rice to the Americas. In 1685, a storm-battered ship sailing from Madagascar Island in the Charlestown harbor. To repay the colonists, the ship's captain gave them a gift of golden seed rice. Now, the marshlands of the Carolinas and Georgia proved to be the ideal place for rice production. And by 1700, rice was well established as a major crop for the colonists. Now, rice farming's extremely high labor requirements are credited with starting the plantation era of the southern states. Now, the 1849 gold rush brought about 40,000 Chinese to California to work. Now, farmers in the Sacramento Valley found that rice would grow well in the heavy clay soils that were unsuitable for other crops. And by 1920, California became a major rice producing state in the United States. And starting in the 1880s, mechanization of farming established what are today's major southern rice growing states, namely Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Missouri, and Texas. Some rice trivia. And more than 1 billion people throughout the world are actively involved in growing rice, believe it or not. Now, 50% of the world's rice is eaten within 8 miles of where it's grown. Now, rice was a secret ingredient in ancient Chinese mortar that gave it such great strength. And it is incorporated in the Great Wall of China. Arkansas produces 9 billion pounds of rice annually. Rice is also the first food a new bride in India offers to her husband and the first food offered to a baby. Rice is the main food source for half of the world's population. Now, Americans consume about 25 pounds of rice annually. Asians up to 300 pounds, and in the UAE, or the United Arab Emirates, about 450 pounds. Conversely, the French only consume about 10 pounds of rice a year, favoring pasta and potatoes. And rice is actually grown on every continent except Antarctica. And there are literally thousands of varieties of rice. And we'll look at a few in a few minutes. And one rice seed can yield 3,000 grains. It is, in fact, the highest yielding cereal grain and one of the reasons why it is so consumed and cultivated worldwide. If you look at rice nutrition and comparing brown rice and white rice, you'll see not that much of a difference. Brown rice does have a little bit more fiber and a small fat content from the germ, but virtually they're nearly identical in nutritional value. Okay, let's look at some potato varieties now, and then we'll look at some varieties of rice. If you look at the russet potato, they're medium to large, oblong shaped, light to medium brown skin with white or pale yellow flesh. They're dry, light, and fluffy when cooked, and the hardy skin is rather chewy. Their flavor is said to be mild and earthy with a medium sugar content, and they can be baked, fried, mashed, or roasted. Most often served as a baked potato, though. You have your red or new potatoes, which are quite different in appearance, as you can see. And these are small to medium sized, round with smooth red skin. Now, the flesh is waxy, moist, smooth, and creamy. Flavor is subtly sweet with a mild medium sugar content. And red or new potatoes can also be roasted, mashed, steamed, or boiled, and they're really very good for mash due to their starch content. If you look at white potatoes, these are small to medium size, round to long shape, thin white or tan skin with white flesh. They have a medium starch content, they're slightly creamy, also slightly dense. Their flavor, also described as subtly sweet with a mild to low sugar content, and they could also be mashed, boiled, steamed, or fried. And these are also, much like red potatoes, very good for mashing due to that starch content. Yellow potatoes are medium to large size, round or oblong shape, and they have a golden skin with yellow or golden flesh. And these are also known as Yukon Gold potatoes that you may have heard of. They're slightly waxy, described as velvety texture, and moist. Their flavor is subtly sweet with a rich, buttery flavor and a medium sugar content. And these could be grilled, roasted, and mashed as well, and they're really good roasted or mashed also. These are an interesting variety called purple or blue potatoes. Now, these originated in South America. They have a small to medium size, oblong shape, with a deep blue or purple skin with purple, lavender, pink, or white flesh. And they're really striking when they're cut open and cooked. They have a moist, firm flesh, and you'll see that the Peruvian varieties have a higher starch content and a somewhat floury texture. The flavor is described as earthy, nutty, with a low sugar content. And these are great grilled, roasted, or baked. They can also be made into mashed for a very interesting purple mashed potato. Fingerling potatoes are actually a variety of different colors. They're small in size, they have a finger oblong shape, and the colors red, orange, purple, or white skin with red, orange, purple, yellow, or white flesh. They have a waxy, firm texture. The flavor is described as buttery, nutty, earthy with a medium sugar content, and they can be pan fried, roasted, or steamed. You'll find your fingerling potato varieties are more expensive than some of the other varieties because they're picked very young, they're small in size, and like most baby vegetables, they are more expensive. Similar are the petite or baby potatoes, and these are actually a grade standard based upon size. They're known as size C or smaller. They have the same color, skin, flesh, and sugar content of their larger counterparts. And they're often marketed in a variety of colors, as you can see in the picture here. They have a similar flavor profile, but typically a more concentrated flavor. And these are great for roasting, frying, and their small size makes them very nice for potato salads, where they're often just cut in half and made into a potato salad. Now let's look at some rice varieties. You have regular long grain. Now this is the most common variety of rice that we typically see. The husk and bran are removed. It's white in color, and it is 4 to 5 times as long as it is wide. Now this is typically used as Chinese steamed rice. If we look at converted or long grain rice, this is steamed before milling. It also shortens the cooking time. The husk and bran are removed. It is beige in color, but it does cook white. As I said, the fact of converting makes it have less cooking time, and it's also less starchy and less tendency to stick together when cooked. Brown long grain rice has the husk removed, but the bran remains. It is beige to brown in color. It has a higher fiber content, as we saw when we looked at nutritional values. It does, in fact, have a longer cooking time and a chewy texture, with brown rice taking anywhere from 45 minutes, even up to an hour to cook. Basmati rice, one of my favorites. It is known as the prince of rice. There is a natural flavor chemical that imparts a great fragrance and flavor to this variety of rice, and these long, fluffy grains are typically used in Indian cuisine. We also serve this from time to time on our menus at Applewood, and it is a favorite. Jasmine rice is similar to basmati, and it's native to Thailand. It also has a very great fragrance and features long, fluffy grains when cooked. Japonica, these are interesting. These are short or medium grain rices, and California is the primary growing area for this variety now. Japonica comes in a variety of colors: white, brown, red, and black. And the black is actually a very dark purple color. Now, arborio is a variety of Japonica that is used to make risotto. And Chef Charles will be demonstrating making risotto for you following my presentation. Then we have wild rice. Interestingly enough, wild rice is not a rice at all. It is, in fact, a type of grass seed. There are long, thin brown to black grains. Now, wild rice has a rich, nutty flavor and a chewy texture. Also takes longer to cook, usually upwards of 45 minutes. It is high in fiber, and as I mentioned, it does have that long cooking time. Let's talk a bit about cooking potatoes. Potatoes are very versatile. They can be boiled, and basically you would boil potatoes in enough water to cover them, and then check them with a fork, and when the potatoes are tender, they're basically done. Steaming, similar to boiling, put into a steamer. Roasting, you can roast them whole or slice them into chunks, coat them in olive oil and some seasoning, and roast them again until they're fork tender. Baking, simply take the potatoes. Some people like to wrap them in foil, but it's not necessary. Wrapping in foil actually tends to steam the skin. If you like tender skin, it's usually good to do it that way. But if you prefer a crisp skin on your baked potato, then don't cover it. Just roast it in the oven, uncovered whole, again, until fork tender. And of course, frying, where you typically cut the potato into slices or juliennes, and then frying at about 350 degrees until the potatoes are golden brown and tender. For cooking rice, here's a basic recipe. You want to use 1 part of rice to 2 parts of water. And that means you're going to end up with 3 parts of rice for every part of rice that you cook. So if you cook 1 cup of rice, you'll end up with approximately 3 cups of cooked rice. Now, salt and butter are optional. You want to boil the water first and then add the rice. Let it come back to a boil and then lower the heat, cover, and cook for 20 minutes to an hour, depending upon the variety. With the converted rices, closer to 20 minutes, and the whole grain varieties, usually 45 minutes to an hour. There are many other grains that have become popular over the years. Some of these have been around for literally thousands of years. Amaranth, barley, buckwheat or kasha, bulgur, which is used to make tabbouleh. We have corn. Many people don't realize that corn is actually a grain, and cornmeal is used to make the dish polenta, which we often have on the menu at Applewood. Wheat is available in a couple of different varieties, farro, frika, or spelt, and can be cooked much like other grains like rice. Millet, oats, which I don't think we often think of as a grain. We think of it as a breakfast food, but oats is certainly a grain as well, and quinoa, which has become quite popular over the years, and we often feature in our menus at Applewood as well. At this point, I would like to introduce our executive chef, Charles Arola, and he's going to be demonstrating preparing the famous Italian rice dish, risotto. I thank you for joining us today. Until the next time, have a great day, folks.
Hi, folks. Welcome to the third installment of Applewood's virtual CIA class. Today we're here to demonstrate how to make risotto. Now, risotto, for those of you who don't know, is it's a rice. It's a little bit different than regular rice. When you look at risotto, which is arborio rice, or called in Italy arborio rice, it's a little bit shorter and a little bit fatter than what we're normally accustomed to, the Uncle Ben's or things like that. It's also a little bit higher in starch content. Now, risotto is made in a couple of stages. And what we've done here today, I have risotto that has already been par cooked, because naturally, as a rice product, if we were starting from raw, it would probably take us a good 30 to 40 minutes to stand here and do it. So I do have some risotto that's already been par cooked, and what I'd like to do now is finish it and show you how the finishing process is done. So this risotto has been sauteed in a little butter, and then we've added hot chicken stock to it. We add hot chicken stock, stir it, let it absorb, let it cook, let it absorb. We add a little more chicken stock to it, let it absorb again, and then add a little more to it, let it absorb one more time. So now for the finishing process, I have some chicken stock that's right here on the stove simmering. It's nice, it's hot. I don't know if you can see the steam, but it's nice, golden, beautiful chicken stock that is sitting here simmering. What I'm going to do to that is turn my other flame onto about a medium heat, a low to medium heat, and I'm going to take some of our already par-cooked risotto. I would say this would probably work out cup-wise to be about 2, maybe 3 cups of risotto, par-cooked risotto. So let's call that 3 cups. So to this, I will add a splash of white wine, and we're using a dry Chardonnay today. We're using a Sean Minor dry Chardonnay. I'm going to put my finger on the cap and just give it a little dash for some flavor, and I'm going to mix it in. Now, risotto is one of those things where pretty much you're stirring it the whole entire time. So I'm going to let this risotto absorb the wine, and then I'm going to start to add the hot chicken stock. And I'm going to add a nice ladleful, probably 4 ounces of hot chicken stock, and we'll pour that in. And now I'm just going to stir. And as this risotto comes back, as the stock comes back to a boil, the rice will begin to absorb it, and we'll add a little more. Now, I'm making risotto today. Pretty much we're making Parmesan risotto. So at the end of this demonstration, I will be adding some grated Parmesan cheese and butter. There are many, many variations of risotto that can be done. One of my favorites is if you make this with a nice shrimp or seafood broth, and you par cook the risotto with that, and then add a seafood broth to the risotto, and then some cheese in there as well, and that can be garnished with some grilled shrimp or a grilled lobster tail. This particular Parmesan risotto would be lovely with some artichokes on it and roasted peppers. You could also make a vegetable stock to cook the risotto in. And again, I always like it with butter and cheese, but then certainly lay some nice grilled vegetables on it in the summertime for a little bit of a lighter dish. But now, that chicken stock has already been absorbed by this risotto. I'm going to add chicken stock one more time. About another 4 ounces of chicken stock. And again, just continue stirring. It looks like you might have too much, but believe me, the rice will absorb all of the stock. And what I find the beauty of the risotto is once the butter goes in and the cheese goes in and the chicken stock, it becomes nice and creamy, flavorful, just wonderful, wonderful dish. So we're just going to let it simmer away in the pan, stirring. We don't want any lumps. Now, I don't know if you can really see that, but let's just take a good look in the camera. It's nice, it's thick, it's liquidy somewhat. It's kind of has the consistency of a porridge or a farina or a loose polenta. So what I'd like to do now is I'm going to take a nice generous amount of unsalted butter, and I'm going to add that, probably what would be maybe almost a stick of butter, about a quarter pound. Again, I'm going to stir that in and let it melt, and I'm just going to consistently stir and stir and stir. Oh yeah. Just wonderful. And then I'm going to take our grated cheese. You have some nice grated Parmesan cheese. And again, I'm going to be generous with it. I will take maybe 2 nice heaping tablespoons. Add that. Continue stirring. Let the cheese melt. Let the butter melt. The cheese will begin to thicken it up a little bit more. In addition to the rice absorbing the chicken stock and the butter and the cheese and the wine, this is a wonderful dish. Risotto can be a main dish on its own, or certainly as a side dish with a protein. Even this risotto right here with a nice grilled chicken breast on it, or a piece of fish, piece of grilled swordfish, there'd be nothing wrong with that. Okay, now if you see, we've got a nice, creamy, wonderful risotto here that I will take. Nice heaping couple of spoons. In our bowl. I sometimes like it with a little broth just around on the sides. If I'm eating it as a main course. And then who's to say you can't take a little more Parmesan cheese and give it another sprinkle. And so there you have it. This is Parmesan risotto a la Applewood CIA class. I hope you've enjoyed this class today, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. Have a great afternoon. Bye-bye now.